Good. All right, we are live right now, and I think that's all good. So I'm going to go onto my computer here. I'm a one-man show, so we will see if everything is plugged in and you can hear me on the sound. I'm just going to, first of all, I'm going to log in so I can hear you guys on here and just check if there are any sound issues. Let's just see what we've got here. I may have to see. Yeah, the sound's coming through. All right, so now that we know that works, welcome everybody to the weekly recap show for talking about everything crypto that has happened in the past week. I have some amazing guests here. You will notice that this week we are in person, so it's like we've got real people here. So that's really, really exciting. And I'm just going to pull up the chat here so I can see you guys, because that's my favorite part here. All right, so today, just to introduce all of our amazing guests, you will have recognized the gentleman next to me, Chris Pacier, from the video I released yesterday. We talked about the Bitcoin Cash fork, and I know there were a lot of comments in the video about things to do with patents and about things to do with, you know, which side are we on, and, you know, are we biased, and what is the future of Bitcoin Cash, all those things. So we're going to be talking a little bit about that and recent developments that happened this week in the Bitcoin Cash debate. You have Craig Wright on one side, you have Bitcoin ABC and Bitcoin Unlimited on the other, and they're trying to hash things out, mind the pun, at the moment. So we're going to be talking about that a little bit. We have Chris Karabat, otherwise known as Zaphoid. He is the creator of Smart Cash. So you would have seen him on many weekly recap show. Thank you so much for being back here. Don't forget to use the microphone so they can hear you all. We have Joe. Awkward. It is a little bit awkward, but it's exciting. I like being here in person. I'll explain to people why we're here in person in a second. We have Joel Valenzuela, who is part of Dash Force News, an awesome show that talks about everything going on with Dash, and there are always heaps of things going on with Dash. So we are going to get right into things. Right now, we are currently all here because there is a festival in New Hampshire called the Free Coast Festival, which is super exciting. And it's basically a festival that brings together people who believe in freedom and who are part of what's called the Free State Project movement, and gets them all together. And they're generally people who are very interested in cryptocurrency. Got lots of people at the conference who are from the crypto side, like sponsoring events and all kinds of things. We've got a cruise happening, which is really exciting. So I'm super pumped about that. But maybe I'll just give you a little bit of a background as to what the Free State Project is. I was actually just chatting to Joel earlier on his show, The Three Amigos, and I talked about how I first learned about the Free State Project, and it was at a Students for Liberty conference about 6 years ago, and they had a table set up, and there was like this contract that they were getting people to sign. I'm like, what is this contract? Like, is this like a social contract? Like, what are you doing here, guys? And I saw that they said, okay, if we get enough people to sign this, basically all the people who sign this contract are pledging that they will move to New Hampshire within the next 5 years. And it's like, that's a weird thing to say. Why are you getting people to move to New Hampshire? But the idea is that if you have enough people who are interested in freedom and in curtailing the overreach of government, and you get them all in the same jurisdiction, then you can actually work within the system to try and fix things. You know, you can have a critical mass. People say, well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, if you get enough like-minded people in the same place, your vote does matter. You know, you can actually make a difference and make legislation and regulation that's a lot more freedom enabling. So that's really exciting. I know a lot of people are trying different routes with the freedom movement. You've got seasteaders, and you've got, you know, the like Honduras and free cities. Then you've got like SEZs across the world, and places like Hutt River, which kind of didn't really want to politicize this at all, but were just like, we secede. And then you've got the Free State Project, people who actually want to work within the system. It's not like an agorist thing going around the system. They actually say, no, we can vote in people, get them into local governments, and create a place that is substantially more free than anywhere else you'll find in America. So I'm really excited that on this contract, they reached the number of people on this pledge And it triggered the move in 2016, and you've seen all these people flock to New Hampshire, and it's been really, really exciting. Like, Joelle, actually, if you wanted to start, just tell me a little bit about that. So you live in New Hampshire, and you work with people trying to spread awareness about cryptocurrency here. You've got a whole bunch of merchants who have had cryptocurrency adopted in their stores and restaurants.
Yeah. So that's the thing, though. I think a big misconception about the Free State Project is a lot of people think of it as a political movement, that people came here to engage in the good old art of politicking, which was one of the major original ideas of what people were going to do when they moved here. But the pledge is open-ended. It just, we pledge to do our fullest practical effort to advance liberty once we move here. How do you do that? You know, it's up to anyone. It's radically individualist, and what it turns out that the thing that people have been doing the most, from what I've seen, has been engaging in cryptocurrencies. They've been actually using cryptocurrencies, using them to buy and sell things, trade with them, invest with them, get new merchants on board, do startups, all kinds of things. And it's funny because this was a relatively like old school, small town, semi-rural state that's very low population, and you would not think this to be the crypto mecca of the world. And it's definitely in the running of top 5 at the very minimum.
At the minimum, that's understating it completely. I thought that, New York being the financial capital of the world, they'd have some understanding of incentivization and, commerce. And it just seems that they've completely missed the boat and just regulated out of existence. So it's great to see New Hampshire picking up the slack.
Well, it's interesting because of when you're talking about like a per capita kind of how much is crypto actually used in daily life? The 2 places that are king are Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and Caracas, Venezuela. Caracas has almost 1,000 Dash accepting businesses just in that city alone as of today. And it's a completely different, I think it's for the exact same reason, but a completely different angle. The same reason is freedom. Economic freedom really makes the world better, and cryptocurrency works for that. Portsmouth is because you have all these Free State Project crazy people like myself that just say, that basically by saying that we care about freedom, have already implicitly agreed to transact preferentially in cryptocurrency. And I've noticed that because that used to be in the early days. The thing about all these businesses around Portsmouth now is not all of them are from explicitly liberty-minded people, which is weird because in the early days you had to be you go up to that guy who moved for the Free State Project or is associated, and say, hey, you're one of us, you got to take Bitcoin now. And then I guess I'm taking Bitcoin. There would never be any pushback. It's just they're sold on the idea. That's why it started here. And then now you have people like Derek and Steven of AnyPay who run this spot here, just going out there and spreading the great word to the average person and making that happen. But it's radical freedom there, and then it's radical freedom in Venezuela as well, where people don't necessarily believe, they don't need to believe because they need it right now. And so they're jumping on board with that, but it's the exact same kind of a thing. And so that's one reason why the Free Coast Festival is here in Portsmouth, is because it's a great way to get everyone here to experience what we're all talking about. So many people, crypto fanboys the world over, just saying, oh, this is great, wouldn't it be great? Oh, I know I'm going to go to the one place in my town that takes Bitcoin or whatever, and then, oh, they're closed on the weekends, oh, what am I going to do? And there's always and then you come here and it's okay, you can go to dozens of businesses, just even on the same street, just pop in and spend, and you don't have to be oh yeah, well, let me get that manager who knows how to do that. It's just, they know how to do it. In fact, down at the Maison Navarre, the French bakery, a few times ago when I went there, I went to pay the Dash, and then they just instantly got it, and I paid quicker than the guy who's paying with his card before me. And the guy behind me was like, can I do Apple Pay? I'm oh, I don't know how to do that. Let me figure that out. I'm yeah, this is something special we got here, and that's why we're all here. We're kind of the converted already, but we're here to get as many people as possible to just see what this is, because everyone talks about, oh, we're going to use this, and what is Starbucks going to start taking? Starbucks is going to come out with an app that takes it, and all this hypothetical stuff. It's dude, it's you don't have to wait. It is risen. It is here right now.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. I know that when I've done videos around the world, I always make a point to find the one cafe in town that accepted Bitcoin or any other currency. It was only ever Bitcoin though. And I'd go there, and I'd call them up in advance, be like, it says on your website you do this thing. They're like, no, I don't understand. No, like, I'll try my luck. So I'd show up there, and I'd have my camera ready. I'd be like, can I buy this tea with Bitcoin? They'd be like, I don't know what that is. Da, da, da. I'd get my manager, and then the manager would be like, oh yeah, I've heard something about that. And they'd get the owner, and then and finally it'd be like one cryptocurrency enthusiast who worked there had like set this up, and no one else really knew how to use it. And it's just fascinating. Like fast forward, 1, 2, 3 years, and suddenly you're just seeing, as you said, stores where you can go in and it's seamless and it's faster than using the traditional financial system.
Yeah, and it's been a little under the radar actually, because people have been talking about during the markets go up, everyone's like, oh my gosh, everyone's using Bitcoin, and then the market goes down, no one's using Bitcoin. And this has been a little bit of a ninja launch. People have just started using this.
Do you know how many people, like how frequently they're using it in Venezuela? Like, so you said 1,000 merchants. Is it like, they get like one person a day, one a week? Is everyone using it?
Yeah, it depends on the merchant. There have been some that are like a few, like 5 a day kind of thing. There's some that just, I believe when it was like 500 merchants that took it, which was like last month, just so hilarious how fast it's been, like about 190 of them had received their first Dash purchase at the spot. And so I don't know what it's like now. I will be talking to the actual guy who runs the point of sale that they use to get the specific figures, but there is use, and it's going up all the time, and I believe that the local KFC, Papa John's, and Subway are now going to be taking it. I don't know if it's all of them.
So
but
it's not illegal to take it in Venezuela?
No, and this is a little bit of a misconception, is it is actually usage of cryptocurrency for currency type reasons is actually protected by law in Venezuela, which is very odd. You'd think like, totalitarian state, everything bad, and then they have better crypto laws in some areas. Obviously, we're not talking about the trading and stuff like that, but in some ways, it's better than the first world.
Maybe it's because they're so economically illiterate there, hence why they're trying out this whole socialism thing, that they're like, oh, we don't understand the relationship between, totalitarian power and a monopoly on the money supply. Because America has that down pat. They're like, you cannot use this, you can't even use gold, for a while. Like that note no longer is a token that will help you redeem this for gold. We're making it illegal to hold any other currency. And they've only started to change their tune because Bitcoin came around and they were like, oh, here's a thing we can't shut down. What do we do? And so I think they're playing this strange game where there's a lot of rhetoric in the media and they're saying, oh, well, how do we regulate this thing and stop people using it and make sure that we, are in charge of the direction that it's going in and all this. And they're missing the point entirely that they can't control it, that it's outside of their jurisdiction, and it doesn't matter.
Can't stop the signal.
Can't stop. And it's fascinating what's going on, this sort of like, myopic, blinders on. I'm not going to admit the reality that this is a turning point, and this is a game changer. Like the tables have been turned with regard to power, and I think that we're going to see going forward into the future more and more people, like the individual, having more power than they've ever had before, and I think that's just a really exciting time.
It's also funny that one of the big criticisms is the exchange rate fluctuates so much that you can't really use it as money, but I mean, it doesn't fluctuate as much as the Bolivar.
The government is forcing them to.
I'd like to add with that when you're seeing giant decreases in values, like 10% down in one day, no one's going to use this crypto stuff. Well, it's like, that's what the Bolivar was doing every day, and it doesn't stop. There is no break to it's just free fall, and so in that kind of environment, it really does help.
And it's fascinating to see, there was a time there, crypto when it first started, the amount of volatility was huge. Even if it was dropping $1, if it's only worth $1 and it's dropping $1, that's a huge drop right there. Now we're seeing it just really even out. And it's been getting better and better as the years go by. And there are times when people will be like, oh, it's so volatile, how do you use it? And I'm like, did you not see the yen? Like it's a larger percentage drop that happened yesterday than we've seen in Bitcoin for 6 months. What are you talking about? Or the ruble, when you had suddenly that just plummeted. And no one's talking about that the ruble's no longer money because it's volatile. It's try telling that to the Russian government.
Just the last point on that I put it is people say, oh, how can you afford to like work for this kind of stuff if the value goes so up and down? And I'm like, well, when I first started, the first Dash I earned was, I mean, the first Bitcoin I earned was like when it was like 130 per Bitcoin way back when, but I wasn't actively earning it. But when I first Dash I earned late 2016 was like $7 a coin. I got paid 3 Dash for writing an article. And then at its lowest this year was like 130. So like 20 times, like I'm gonna cry that it crashed down to 20 times higher than when I started using it. Like, I'll take those odds, thank you very much.
Yeah, and one of the other big topics on Venezuela is right now the government's shutting down most of the legitimate exchanges there. All of our community members there are having a hard time figuring out how to get Bitcoin and get cryptocurrencies for their bolivar because legitimate exchanges are shut down and nobody outside the country really wants to accept bolivars, do anything except make handbags or something, which is what they're doing in Colombia right now.
Yep.
One of the things to go back to the inflation that I always like talking about is, a couple weeks ago, the Bitcoin to Turkish dollar was at its yearly high.
Interesting.
And, despite all this pain and fear we're feeling in the bull market, you look at Turkey, you look at Iran, you look at South Africa, you look at, Venezuela, Argentina, all of these countries, they are falling way faster than the crypto markets are. One of the hard parts that we have in a lot of these countries is, especially for proposal-based cryptocurrencies like Dash, like Smart Cash, is actually confirming legitimacy. For example, you can go searching for vendors in Venezuela and Caracas, and you'll see 30 vendors at the same address. So, people are trying to do what they can there, and knowing what's actually going on the ground is so hard when everything is in so much flux that we feel for the people, and what we're trying to do is build tools so they can take control of their own financial future, but it's so hard when they're struggling to buy food. I mean, the volume of Bitcoin traded in Venezuela has not gone up for the last 12 months. It's been flat because, I dropped my phone on the ground, because it's not like people who've lost 17 pounds a year on average have a bunch of extra money to buy crypto.
Yeah.
So I think there's going to be huge markets for it down there as systems break down, but I feel there's going to be a whole lot of pain between here and there that we're going to need to look into and care about.
Yeah.
There was a story from, I don't know, a couple of years ago maybe a year or 2 or 3, where there was basically like the number one enemy of like on the Venezuela enemy list for their government was some Home Depot employee in like Georgia. Did you remember that?
Yes.
Number one enemy.
So he's just like a sales floor, he's like a normal customer service employee at Home Depot. And so what he's doing is he goes home every night, and he's a Venezuelan guy himself. I guess he immigrated from there. But he goes home every night and he publishes a website where he puts like the exchange rate for like different currencies against the bolivar or whatever. And I guess people use that as like the benchmark for like what to trade with. And so like they view this as like undermining their economy.
Wow.
That is actually a problem, is that the official exchange rate is completely different from the real one,
Right.
and it's kind of enforced by law. And so, for example, the automatic app conversion things in the Dash wallets is like way off, and so there have been problems. So what they've had to do in order to get the conversion rate is get the Dash to Bitcoin conversion rate, get that from the local Bitcoin's price rather than an exchange price or something like that, to just get like what's the real price. And of course, that's how you get a Home Depot guy on the hit list, is just by doing something to find out what the real price is,
Yeah.
which is pretty insane.
I just love how just some random person can just use his own computer and just undermine the Venezuelan government.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, so
One of the questions we had at our Bitcoin meetup I went to last week in Philadelphia was, what was more disruptive, blockchain or the internet? And frankly, right now, the internet is still more disruptive because the guy can do that. Blockchain's not there yet. It has potential. but it
Absolutely
not
has
reached that
potential.
disruptiveness, but
Yeah.
the key is human communication.
Absolutely. So a lot of interesting things happening this week, not just in Venezuela, not just here in New Hampshire, which seems to be like the opposite ends of the spectrum, like the Free State Project and a
It's kind of
totalitarian
like
regime.
the circle, opposite ends end up very close to each other in a certain way, because it's like, was it the Pirates of the Caribbean when you flip the ship upside down, end up on the other side of the world. It's just like, it's like one of those kinds of things.
So you got people using crypto in both places for different reasons.
Yes, exactly.
And like some of them because they really want to and they want to embrace the freedom that they have, and the other side because it's an absolute necessity. And chatting with Sarah Blinko, who was on the show last week, how she was saying she's putting these interviews together in the last 2 weeks. She's been chatting to Venezuelans about use cases and them saying, listen, the most important thing for us is microtransactions. We live off this. This isn't like an anecdote that you can tell your friends like, oh, Bitcoin's saving the world. This actually saving lives. It's not this cheesy thing that we can throw out there and say it's not just about me wanting the privilege of all these different options. It's like, no, in some places this is a lifeline, and we need to recognize that and know that the use cases they're using it, it's not just for B2B, it's not just for like huge payments, it's like microtransactions, everyday purchases. But I do want to talk about like some things that are going on in the last week in the news. I know, Chris, yesterday I put out a video of you. We chatted last week about the Bitcoin Cash fork. And this is and this is a contentious issue, as I always note, like when we're talking about any different camps that tend to get very tribalistic, people, this is their wealth. This is,
Speaking of which, Chris, where's your tribal token? I don't see any little crypto symbol on it.
Are you being nonpartisan right now, Chris?
I don't know whether to hate you or love you right now based on what you're
Just
wearing.
hate him by default until he proves himself. That's what people should do on the internet.
Yep.
And seem to always
sounds
do.
like the way of crypto Twitter.
Absolutely. No, so we put out a video. You talked about the divide between. Basically, it's the end-chain side of things where you've got Craig Wright who wants to roll things back, and he has a bunch of patents that he wants to enforce and doesn't want these new things implemented into the chain. And then you have Bitcoin ABC, Bitcoin Unlimited on the other side who are also debating about things. I have to say that a lot of people commented in the video and were saying, listen, you're not giving Craig Wright, fake Satoshi, a good hearing. Sorry, no, I don't mean to be contentious.
This is completely unbiased.
Completely unbiased. No, I mean, they did raise some interesting points, though. They were basically saying, listen, he may be using patents, but he's not going to go out and sue people if you're using his version of Bitcoin Cash. This seems to be problematic if they're basically saying, IP is allowed, you're allowed to have patents and sue people for using your blockchain tech, hence why we don't want to roll this into the actual tech. And that it's like, as long as you abide by our definition of what the real Bitcoin Cash is, it's not even the real Bitcoin anymore, it's like the real Bitcoin Cash. So let's talk about that. On the one side of things, obviously Craig is saying, I want to protect Bitcoin. And I believe, he's probably very genuine about that. He probably does feel very strongly about this tech.
We can say that at least. We can. Let's believe the best in people at
let's
first.
Believe the best.
Innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
Right?
Just because he's now threatening lawsuits for people who abuse the patent and use it for ways that are not in line with, that don't toe the line with Bitcoin Cash.
Not in Satoshi's visions, right
not
there in the name.
Not him. So Chris, I want to hear your view on this. That was some of the concerns, but there are other concerns in there from people who said, it's not a fair assessment, like it was a bit of a biased point of view. So tell me a little bit, give people who didn't watch the video like a quick backstory of the different sides, what's been going on this week with the fork issues.
Yeah, so I mean the different sides come down to, you have Craig Wright and his company nChain on one hand, and what they kind of want to see with Bitcoin Cash is, Craig's just talking about kind of returning it to at least kind of like the state, not necessarily the state of the software, but like the state of the protocol in like version 0.1 when it was first released, where at least there were definitely bugs in the software and in the protocol in version 0.1. So at least presumably with those bugs fixed, he wants to kind of return it to that state. And then he kind of just wants to like lock it in and say no more changes. And that's kind of an appealing vision to people. But on the other hand, you have many developers realize that if you want to scale and grow, you're going to need to make changes, right? You're going to need to innovate. There's going to be all kinds of things that you're going to have to do in the future. And it's kind of a little ridiculous to say we're just going to lock in 2009 tech and it'll just stand forever.
Well, I mean, to play devil's advocate there, the argument is that the simpler you make the code, the bare minimum product that you provide, the harder it is going to be to attack that, to have bugs, to undermine the technology. So there is something to keeping things at very basic level, which is why a lot of people don't like things like Lightning Network or second layer solutions. They think that Bitcoin should be this very basic thing.
Yeah.
Like, is that, would you disagree?
No, I don't disagree. I think that's a valid argument. I think being very conservative with things is certainly a vision you can appreciate. The flip side is, people with at least the Bitcoin Cash advocates have always wanted to see it scale to really large levels and to a lot of user base. And you're not going to get there without changes. The software itself today is not capable of scaling just the way the software is written, so you can't just keep the software unchanged and just have it take more transactions. It just won't work. So the software needs to change, and it needs to change in a pretty invasive way that's going
All right, guys, is that working now? When did the sound go off? Oh dear. I don't know why it goes off, but it's this thing here. So if anyone wants to look up a Tascam, a little thing here, and tell me why this thing just shuts off and the sound, I'm not quite sure, but that's why I have my chat open, because you guys are awesome and you just alert me of that right at the start. So I just asked Chris a question about Bitcoin ABC, and I wanted to know, like, a lot of people are saying that they're just rushing through some changes right now and there's some contention there. So Chris, would you agree that they are rushing things at the moment? They should be more conservative?
Well, I mean, the 6-month hard fork schedule, once every 6 months, is a pretty aggressive hard fork schedule, and I think it was kind of done that way because, when something's small and there's not a lot of people working on it, it's easier to get changes through than when it's very widely used. And so I think they were like, better just ram everything through as quick as we can before it gets really big, and then it's like really difficult to get stuff through. So I think that's part of the reason for it. As far as is this particular change, could we hold off another 6 months? Would that be better? I mean, it would be better from the standpoint of people. It might be a little less contentious at that point, but I don't know if 6 months from now anyone's going to change their mind, right? I think you'd be right back in the same spot 6 months from now, and so it's kind of might as well just have the debate now over the issue, because I'm not sure just simply pushing it off is going to make much of a difference at this point.
Right. And Chris, do you have anything to add on that?
I mean, from my perspective, we're entering into a new and unusual free market of money that we've never been into before. Having the ideal that the first edition of this money is the one that will last forever seems hopelessly naive. Otherwise, we'd still be using the Model T, and we'd still be all running on 256K of memory. I mean, that's just not how tech works.
Right.
Yeah.
And trying to pretend that this is going to work differently than all the other technological revolutions is naive from my perspective.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're going to have to make upgrades, you're going to have to change. Things are going to improve, the environment you're dealing with is going to grow, and adjustments will have to be made, and in the blockchain, that means hard forks.
Yep.
And you're just going to have a process to deal with that. Whether or not the every 6-month period is overly aggressive or not, you know, that's up to them and their developers, and if it ends up being overly disruptive to their system, then their system will lose.
So that's another question that people have had. You know, one side says that hard forks are inherently dangerous. The other side says that, no, this is meant to be hard forked. This is how you make changes. And then you have Craig saying, like, the only changes that are ever allowed are hard forks. You're not allowed soft forks anywhere, and anyone who uses soft forks, it's not real Bitcoin. Or not real Bitcoin Cash.
He wants a hard fork just to get the version to where he wants it, and then like no other changes ever again after that. So he's like the ultimate Bitcoin maximalist in that sense, because he's like, I don't know.
I have a fun thing to contribute that. You know, our buddy Tone Vase, the Bitcoin maximalist, he's a big fan of Craig Wright. He and Craig Wright actually sat together at a dinner table and shared a meal and shared a conversation. They said they got along pretty well. They agreed on just about everything except for which version of Bitcoin they like better, because they're both like the same.
We all
Bitcoin
agree that
maximalists.
we should be dictators, and no one else should get a say.
And now you see the violence inherent in the system.
Oh boy. So lots of things happening this week with Bitcoin Cash. When does the fork take place?
November 15th. I'm not sure what N-Chain software, I assume also November 15th, but it could fork earlier, I don't know.
And the idea is that, like, Craig doesn't want to use something that you explained in the video, replay protection, which basically means it forces people's hand and means that they have to choose, because it isn't their coins aren't protected on competing chains. If you fork this, there's nothing to stop your coins on this chain being moved also. Yeah. So you basically have to choose which version you want, and that's it. You can only use that.
Or be extremely careful about how you do it, but it is technically possible to move coins on one chain without them moving on another without replay protection. It's just not something a normal person would know how to do.
Right.
Yeah.
And didn't Cobra release a version that has replay protection?
So yeah, explain that. So Cobra is the person who owns Bitcoin.org.
Yeah, he's a little bit of a bad actor in the space, I think.
He's very controversial. But he seems to have provided some sort of a bridge there. Is that the idea?
I didn't look too deeply into it. I think he's just releasing a client with no changes to it, which is interesting because the Bitcoin ABC software, actually, if you don't upgrade your software every 6 months, it automatically forks you off the network because it changes the
fork off.
Yeah, it changes the
least one of those
SIG hash
jokes
in the
a second.
transaction. So like it's kind of one of those things where it says if you want to keep using Bitcoin Cash, you have to upgrade. So just simply not upgrading is not a choice for people who are using Bitcoin ABC because you fork yourself off. So I think Cobra might be changing it so that it doesn't fork it off the network. I don't know. So,
That's a bit Windows-esque.
yeah.
So we're not.
Ethereum has that Ice Age too. It's kind of a similar concept.
So there are a lot of things happening this week. The debate seems to just be getting more and more heated. I thought you did a great job on the video, by the way, just explaining where the different camps are and like talking about Bitcoin Unlimited versus Bitcoin ABC, what their contention is. And they seem to have found some sort of a compromise, or you predict that they will have a compromise if part of what they want to implement, it's not like right off the bat. If there's time, like explain how that works.
Yeah, so Bitcoin Unlimited has said they're going to make it a kind of like a runtime option in their software to choose what set of consensus rules you want their software to use. So it'll potentially be compatible with ABC in that context. I don't know if the debate between the two, the ABC and Unlimited has been, I know it hasn't been resolved because I just looked, just now, like Andrew Stone published an article like opposing the Bitcoin ABC, the canonical transaction ordering. So I don't think the debate on that is over. But
and can you explain to the viewers why he's opposing that?
I only skimmed his article. It sounded like he said it's kind of not necessary to achieve what they want to achieve, which to some extent, I kind of agree in that it's not the primary change that ABC wants to do is to remove the current ordering requirement. And then your kind of two choices left over are either no ordering or some other canonical ordering. And so they're arguing for the canonical ordering. But yeah, just removing the ordering requirement would enable the software to work better as well. You don't per se need a canonical ordering.
Right.
That seemed to be, I think, like the main argument. Then he had another argument about how like the software serves up data to SPV clients that connect to it, which was a little technical, and I don't know if I followed his argument on that because my understanding of how it does it was different than what he described. But that was just my brief skim. So, but there's still people with different opinions, I guess is the point.
Right.
Yeah.
So we talked a little bit about all of the stuff going on in Bitcoin Cash. There's always a lot of drama there, and a lot of people who really believe in Craig Wright, who are following him. I don't understand the logic there. I mean, there's a lot of debate as to whether or not he had some role in
Right
early.
fan, aren't you?
Absolutely.
He's a countryman, isn't he?
He's a fellow countryman as an Australian, because I'm very much about arbitrary, like, national borders as defined by governments. I definitely resonate with him as like a kindred spirit. No, but it is interesting to see people like just kind of fall into line with what he says. As you mentioned in the video, he wants to increase the block size to 128 megabytes, and as far as like all the research goes that Bitcoin ABC has done, you can explain it better than I can, but you said that that's not a throughput that Bitcoin can handle, and that there have been lots of errors and it just doesn't work. So, and it seems that the N-Chain hasn't done research into this, haven't produced code, they actually don't have the technical foundation to support implementing a change like that. So I just wonder why people are supporting that sort of a change.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I do know, because Craig tells people that the only problem is you just need to run faster hardware, right? So he tells people that you just need to suck it up and stop complaining about how much it costs to run a node and just shell out for a lot of money for a really expensive computer. The problem is the more money you spend on a computer, you get more CPU cores. It doesn't necessarily make a CPU core more faster. Yeah. And so the software is just not designed to use more than one CPU core at a time. So just simply spending more money is not going to make it get over that bottleneck. The software needs to be changed if you want to get over that bottleneck. And people pointed it out. So there were a couple bottlenecks. With the testing was actually Bitcoin Unlimited who did the testing on this. There were a couple bottlenecks. One was at around like 22, 25 megabytes. There was one bottleneck, and then there was another around 100. I think N-Chain said they're going to try and work on fixing the bottleneck around like 22, 25 megabytes. But they didn't say anything about the other one, which was at like the 100. So, and I'm skeptical that they can deliver that by November anyway. So it just doesn't, I mean, they haven't delivered anything, right? They've put out all these, patents, and they keep talking, we got this coming, this coming, this coming. Nothing has ever come out, so.
So that's the thing, people were saying, wait, but they're not patenting the underlying, technology. They're just patenting this thing that lies over the top, as if that's some sort of a justification, that people are still free to use this tech. But it seems I'm not a fan of patents personally. Jeffrey Tucker and Gene Epstein did a great debate actually, because they disagreed on some issues about IP. The other day on my show, and I just think that it creates more harm than good. You have a lot of people who are abusing it and just using it as a way to sue people and get money who use your tech, creating vague patents. As you've seen in the open source movement, you have so much innovation going on when people, have these ideas and people can build on it and reiterate and change slightly, and you just see this flourishing of innovation. And it does seem that there is a tech that Craig doesn't want implemented in Bitcoin because he has a patent of something similar. That to me is completely antithetical to the innovation that I want to see in the blockchain movement. I want to see people using this tech. I don't want to see them curtailed because someone has a patent and uses government force to stop people developing this product.
Yeah, and like Jonathan Tuman wrote an article the other day, he actually went through one of these patents and it was like so broad that it could almost cover any blockchain application like at all. Like,
Right.
I mean, maybe Open Bazaar is like an infringement on N-Chain's patents, like because of this. I mean, it's kind of ridiculous. And so he's like, he's telling people like, and this also applies to like Bitcoin too. Like he's saying, and maybe Dash and other ones, like if he says he's only going to allow like these patents to be implemented in whatever chain he approves of, and any other blockchain that implements something that he's patented, he's gonna like try and sue them, right? Which is kind of ridiculous. So it's like, I mean, that really does kind of like hamstring what can be done on like the base protocol layer, if you actually want to even care about that. Like I would just say, go figure out who you're going to sue, because like, I mean, it's, what are you going to sue, a protocol? But that's what, they kind of want to do. And so, yeah, I mean, he had this debate with, I don't agree with the patents stuff either. He had a debate with Stefan Kinsella on patents. I don't know if you watched that. Kinsella, he's become this big Bitcoin maximalist in a few recent years, and he's like, I don't think he knows anything what he's talking about with Bitcoin, but
he certainly has an opinion.
Yeah, definitely has an opinion. But Kinsella is like one of like the main people who's like convinced many libertarians to stop supporting intellectual property, and that's like his strength, obviously. And he just wiped the floor with Craig Wright. Like Craig didn't on that debate. Like Craig couldn't make a coherent argument to save his life. But yeah, so I mean, this is like how I guess N-Chain plans to make money, is just by patenting everything and licensing it all.
It is the American way.
It absolutely is. So I want to change the topic from Bitcoin Cash and talk about different currencies at the moment. I mean, let's talk about this week in the market, like Ether just getting absolutely pummeled. Everything got pummeled this week. It's not a good week for crypto. But I particularly think that talking about how Ether does in the market, it's like problematic at the moment because so much of the ICOs in 2017, 2018 were based on Ethereum. People needed to buy Ethereum and use Ethereum in order to buy into these ICOs. And obviously, like especially if crypto markets are going down, people will need to be cashing in some of their Ether. I presume that a lot of the downward pressure is going to be on people cashing in a lot of their tokens. Any thoughts on that?
Well, the biggest use case for Ethereum in 2017 was ICOs.
Right.
And it was the easiest
And
way for
crypto
somebody
kitties.
to get, there was that too, yes, the cats that were heard around the world. It was the easiest way to make $30 million is to do an ICO, whether or not anything came of it, and most of them haven't.
Right.
There's been a lot of talk on Ethereum lately about how, it's going to die, or it's going to go down to zero, but the platform will remain, or a lot of people talking about it, and they've still not managed to get out their proof of stake breakaway. They've still not managed to do any of that. And it seems there's a lot of attention on the number 2 crypto for not making any changes or addressing any of these issues, which I thought was very interesting. My internal jury is still out on where Ethereum is going to go. I'm not necessarily a fan of infinite inflation currencies, so that's one reason why I've always been somewhat doubtful of it. But at the same time, they do have the most active dApp developers right now. They have a huge following and a huge ecosystem. So
it does seem to be the easiest way if people want to develop products based on blockchain tech to be doing that.
Yeah.
They've made that very simple.
I think it's premature to write them off, but it's certainly worthwhile asking these questions and figuring out where the floor is once these ICOs actually do dump all of their, gains that were not regulated.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's been funny to see. This is a space about decentralization amongst it's a very key principle, yet people tend to centralize around certain projects and stuff. Like I remember back in the day of 90+% Bitcoin market dominance, and just like everything was like, everyone's like, well, I'm going to try out my other coin and stuff, but there's all the exchanges only list Bitcoin fiat trading pairs, all the businesses only accept Bitcoin except for a couple little crypto t-shirt shops or whatever. And just then when something happened to the main network that made it unusable for transactions, especially small ones, everything fell apart. And then everyone started scrambling, everyone's market cap tanked, everything like that. And Ethereum seems to have gone through the same sort of a cycle. based on dApps and smart contracts and things. It's like, this is the thing that everything is going to, your toilet's going to run on an Ethereum smart contract. It's going to like detect the relative moisture in the air and then just like flush for you. It's like everything's going to run on Ethereum.
That's the Tron smart toilet.
Yeah, the Tron.
Put everything
That's
on
going to be,
blockchain.
that's going to be a good one. Patent that before Craig Wright gets at
He's
it.
already on it. He
Yeah.
patented that ages ago.
On
He,
it.
Yes. So what you have like a giant developer like influx to Ethereum. Everyone's trying to build something on Ethereum, and it doesn't seem to have carried through to its promise, at least in the short term, or short term being 3 years or so, which is an eternity in the cryptoverse. And so now it's like everyone's like, you have all these dApp developers that are like, I know a few, for example, I know the Swarm City folks who built their thing on Ethereum, and it's quite a few people who've done things on Ethereum, and now it's like, well, what happens if they're just waiting for Ethereum to get together and just like get the kitty headache? Whenever the kitties come through, then their stuff doesn't work, and it's just they're all waiting around to see what's going to happen with the main chain. And new radical technology has limitations and problems and a lot of kinks to be worked out. But the problem is when you're just waiting on one chain, we've had that sort of problem with like Bitcoin as far as the market, and then even with Ethereum as far as the market, when people were saying, well, Bitcoin's getting slow, let's all jump on Ethereum because it's the next biggest one. It's like, I don't know about that. And then
like they have the same
Yes,
they have the same issues as Bitcoin, but let's hitch
Yes.
our wagon to
and
that.
how the markets have interpreted stuff, like for example, with Bitcoin goes up and down, the whole market goes up and down. But then Ethereum seems to be according to the market, the flagship of alts. And so, like, just imagine, like, however, like when Ethereum takes a huge dump, on the Tron Smart toilet, right? When Ethereum goes down, everyone who's working well also goes down. And it just like, it's so frustrating to see decentralized projects have to endure the negative effects of centralization. It's like, patience. We'll have patience, but it's just a little frustrating in the meantime.
Right. So next topic that I want to cover, I want to look at China a little bit. So China. Insert montage of Donald Trump saying the word China, which is endlessly entertaining. Can I just say?
For that.
It's based on Ethereum for sure. So it's interesting, a country like China, they've had a love-hate relationship with cryptocurrency from the beginning, where they're like, we ban it, but then we allow this bank to have blockchain tech, and then we are really against it, we're going to start enforcing it, but then we have this company that we're going to allow to explore the region. They've actually just announced this week, so the China's Supreme Court recognizes that blockchain evidence is legally binding. This actually seems like a huge step forward for a country that's so oppressive and hasn't been renowned to respect rights or anything like that. To jump on that so soon, I think, is great, because America certainly hasn't had that sort of recognition. And we have huge issues at the moment. I did an interview recently with Scott Stornetta that basically said he first started exploring blockchain tech and how to create immutable ledgers because we were entering the digital age. You have all this digital evidence, for example, that could be tampered with. There's no way to verify, there's no way to timestamp. So he wanted to figure out how to create records that couldn't be tampered with. And obviously blockchain is a great use case for timestamping things, for creating records that can't be changed. And if we started having people looking at property titles in blockchain in countries where perhaps the government can't be trusted, if you start to have digital records in blockchains recognized in courts, that's really fascinating for me and seems to be a huge step forward.
Yeah, in fact, I do think that a lot of people try to think of law as absolute. A lot of people who believe very strongly in government, especially, like to think of law as absolute, but it's just an attempted codification of some kind of thing, that some kind of rules for society to get along. And a lot of people think like property, like you don't own it unless you have a government piece of paper. Well, the government piece of paper came after the ownership, and a lot of people seem to think also that we live in a totalitarian world, and then one day blockchain is going to just crumble it all down. And it's maybe not quite that simple. As much as that's like a great idea for like a futuristic TV sci-fi thriller, for example, it might be it's just seeing how law evolves and things like this. I'm pretty sure you could see more and more record systems, identity systems, et cetera, that are not officially government sanctioned that then the government uses to enforce things in courts when courts are enforced or making things, and then the cops go and enforce the court's ruling. And then, of course, over time, you might have decentralized courts that decide these kinds of things, and then just the cops sort of just sign off on that and enforce it, and then maybe at some point
Right.
don't have that anymore. But point being, blockchain is a great way of having a way of storing this kind of valuable, especially permanent data. And for example, let's talk about a thing that I know very little about, which is cannabis genome sequencing, which there's the Cannabis Genome Project is being sequenced as we speak on the Dash blockchain. And from what I hear from the guys running it, it's in better shape than the Human Genome Project was when they went to the White House. And so now when that's like permanently on a blockchain, like that's something that you won't be able to tamper with, destroy, et cetera, et cetera. And right now it's just like, oh, we did a thing because like we proved we could, man. But in the future, it's going to be, people are going to be using major chains, even minor chains, as like reference points, and not just because we said to prove the technology, but it's just what they use to keep those records. And that's when you can see, just like we saw with Ethereum, that was supposed to run all these fancy smart contracts, and it turns out that the free market decided what it was most efficient at, which was raising a lot of money with a little accountability. And so that's what the market decided. And once the market starts deciding what's stored on the blockchain, rather than people testing out the blockchain by storing stuff on it, that's when we're going to see what this is really good for.
One of the key aspects of blockchain that we always have to think about when talking about legally recognized things is the concept of trustlessness. We use trustless a lot of times in blockchain, and I have a feeling that most of the people who say it have no idea what it actually means. Most people who hear it think, oh, I don't have to trust the person I'm paying. Well, yes, you do. You have to trust that they're still going to give you the stuff. The key with trustlessness is there's no authoritative middleman or authoritative third party that sits there and says, you can't independently verify this, but I say it's okay, so it's cool. And that's been one of the huge parts about government. I mean, that's what the whole land deeds were about. That's what and all the licensing has been about. That's what all of this has been about, is having a trusted third party. Or what the blockchain lets us do with a lot of this stuff is have a trustless third party, where you don't have to worry about believing it. You can independently verify these facts. Is this going to work for everything in existence? Absolutely not. But for stuff like land records, for stuff like, China is also going to use the blockchain-based system for tracking paroled prisoners.
Wow.
And for this kind of stuff, having an independently verifiable database is useful for people who might live in New Hampshire and not trust what the government has to say on certain things.
Right.
Because that's what this is all about. And that's one of the big areas of freedom that the blockchain helps give us, is the ability to have publicly legible but not publicly editable ledgers. So you and anybody else can go look at it, but you seeing it does not mean that you can change it, which is not something that's really been true in the digital world up until this point. Mm-hmm. And the other aspect of it I always want to bring to mind is blockchain itself is a great technology that is separate from the concept of all these cryptocurrencies that we're all here and love. We love the blockchain tech, and we love the currencies, and those are very often intertwined in our minds, and we think that, oh, it's a great bullish sign that China is going to use blockchain tech for this. I'm like, well, no, that has absolutely nothing to do with the currency, and it really has yet to be seen whether there can be a blockchain tech that will work and survive without the financial incentive of a currency underlying it. Because at this point, if there was no money in Bitcoin, anybody could throw together a few ASICs and 51% attack the chain. And which reminds you of something with Bitcoin Cash right now, where they recently lost a bunch of their hashing power. So you could 51% attack the Bitcoin Cash chain with 6% of the Bitcoin hashing power right now.
Whoa.
That's something that I meant to talk about earlier and totally forgot.
That's pretty big news.
Yeah.
Has anyone, have we seen any breaches?
No, it's not. We haven't seen anything yet, and I imagine people are watching it quite carefully.
Yeah.
51% attack is kind of a pet peeve of mine that I've been reading about lately. I expect that we're going to see a lot more of them. We had the Bitcoin Gold one recently. We had the Zencash one also recently. And the ROI on these sorts of attacks is stupid. Like the Zencash guy, he spent 20 grand on NiceHash and got 500 grand worth of Zen.
Wow.
I mean, it is silly. And the only way they've solved is not really by solving any underlying tech, it's just by making the exchanges wait 100 blocks before they let anybody trade any deposits.
Wow.
So it sucks to move stuff in and out of exchanges for Zencash now. And that's the only short-term solution that we have, is you'd have to attack the network for, in Zencash's case, 150 minutes now? I can't remember their exact block time. But for a long time.
And there was an article not too long ago that basically laid out how much it would cost to attack the networks. Even to attack Bitcoin is stupidly cheap compared to the return on investment. And then you go all the coins immediately, straight after that, Ethereum and every other coin. It's so cheap to attack, and I don't think people are really accepting the weight of how serious that is.
Yeah, there's really only the technical knowledge barrier, and more people are figuring out how to do it at this point. And also you have to think about it in such a way of a non-financially motivated attacker, where some big guy with $1 billion comes in and says, I'm a big supporter of coin X, attack all the other coins. I don't care if I make money off of it, just attack them, disrupt their networks, make them useless.
Right, and I mean, for someone to attack it, you have to be a nefarious character, and you have to have the technical knowledge. So I guess we're lucky that in this community it is filled with people who are really excited about the tech and doing good things, but that is definitely not going to remain the case, and there have been other attacks. I do want to quickly mention, so talking about the bear market and everything like that, you've seen Kraken recently, they let go of some of their people.
Yeah, they let go of 57 of their employees, mostly support staff, and I think
it was so sad to hear. I really like that Kraken stood up to against the bit license. They've done some awesome things in terms of just standing up for what I think is right.
I like the ethos behind Kraken. They've done good things. They got some bad press late last year when they were very not usable, but they've done some great jobs improving their platform. I'm a big fan of theirs. So they fired 57 customer service. And I think we're finally getting to the point in the bear market where the buildup that everybody was frantically doing for the first 6 months of the year has caught up with the downslope.
Yeah.
And Kraken says, oh, don't worry. We're still on board for 1,000 employees by the end of the year, but obviously...
I think that they're not the only company that's been letting off people. I know that there have been cuts all across the board for all kinds of different coins, the other go staff members. That's what happens in this realm where you just have this... All of these people, end of 2017, when we had the peak, $20,000 for one Bitcoin, and everyone's just rushing into the space, and we're giving statistics there are 9 available jobs for Bitcoin developers for every one qualified person to fill the job.
Today.
Right. So I mean, it's a huge number regardless of what it is, and it's you've got to think, okay, all of these projects that are employing all these people, I think suddenly are starting to realize that, okay, is there a market still for this? Because as soon as it starts to go down and start to see red, people seem to be jumping ship because they're people who are less technologically aware of the potential of this, and so they're just really looking at the ticker.
Yeah, there's 2 aspects to it. On the one side, I don't think that we're really going to be out of the bear market until a lot more people are feeling a lot of pain. Everybody stayed, there's been a lot of bad news, but for the most part, the core people have stayed pretty positive throughout this whole thing.
Yeah. I think the bullish signal is when every last major crypto Twitter trader person posts a picture of their new minimum wage job tag. I've seen a few already. But when the last one falls, it's the last samurai, the last one standing. Then all of a sudden it'll be bye.
All of the bloggers who are the 10 quick tips for getting rich. It's funny, when I first entered the space, so I started trading in futures markets 2013. And I was really terrible. And my housemate used to take what I was doing as a signal, and he'd do the opposite. So I would be oh my God.
Like Convey's trading advice?
Exactly. Or Gartman, or, I'd be things are only ever going up. This is great. I'm buying in. And I'd hear from the upstairs room, whoop, time to sell. And I'd be what and then, sure enough, it had crashed, and I'd be like, God damn you, and coming to terms with my ineptitude. Like, it didn't take long, and it took, I didn't lose too much because I gave up pretty early. I was like, this is not for me. I don't have what it takes to just go long. So now I'm just like, I'm in it for the long game. I believe in the potential of this tech. But it is funny to see all these people just leaving the ecosystem as soon as they see red. And that's just what we have to deal with. That newcomers come in, new businesses have to realize that it's going to take a while to have longevity in this space.
Yeah.
That was like the most disappointing part of the space for me, is that trading became like the top, what everyone was interested in. And that's like, to me, that's the least interesting aspect of it. But that was like, what everyone wanted to talk about and what everyone was into. And the technology just took a back seat to, their technical analysis or whatever. Yeah.
Right.
TA.
Right.
Yeah, like you've seen the CNBC Fast Money Contra Indicator, right? Yeah, that was great. If you listen to them and do the opposite, 90% of the time you'd be right.
Right. So just as we finish up here, I only got a couple of minutes. There have been comments in the chat here, actually. So Joel, you might be able to help with this. So someone called Juicy G has been talking about Dash in Venezuela. So we did mention earlier, we're talking about Dash being used in Venezuela, Bitcoin being used there. And I mentioned, so I was just in your show Three Amigos earlier, and we were talking about how using Bitcoin in places like Venezuela becomes this really cute anecdote. Like I was talking about it on Fox Business 4 years ago, and it becomes this nice little anecdote we can use to say like, hey, these people are doing this awesome thing, and that's why Bitcoin's
more
useful.
More often enough, this will help this in a very hypothetical sense, not a real world sense.
Right. And so there is some contention about, like, we're talking about 1,000 Dash users. That seems like a really high number. And it seems very hard to vet. We have some skeptics in the chat at the moment who are saying, like, how do we know that these people are actually there, that people are using it? And so I'm just wondering, like, are there any initiatives at the moment to talk, like to be on the ground and talk to people there?
In fact, most of a good chunk of these businesses have either been, there's been a relatively small amount that have been self-added to the Discover Dash listing. Most of these have been because of the merchant adoption program on the ground that's going and talking to all these merchants in person, personally vetting them, setting them up with a point-of-sale system, et cetera, et cetera.
But also, like, what security precautions are being taken? Because I know that, there was a recent article that came out about, like, people are mining Bitcoin in Venezuela, and then 6 months later you hear officials have cracked down on mining in Venezuela, and it's like tragic and terrifying. And you know that these people can't just be advertising themselves and saying, hey, we accept cryptocurrency, come to us, because the governments would shut that down.
So that's always been, like, my point of view has been on that, like, well, keep it on the down low, because what happens is it's like totalitarian state, they're going to crush it and all this kind of stuff. And the person, Eugenia, she started these conferences starting, I believe, last September or so. And she's been running these since day one. And I keep on asking her every single time I get interviewed, like, well, isn't the government getting scared? Don't they not like this? Don't they have a problem? And the answer so far has been, no, they seem to like that there's something there that's taking the pressure off of them because that's the thing that people don't understand about totalitarian states, is they still are states of extremely small minority of people controlling a vast majority of people who are hungry, angry, and will take them out and shoot them in the streets, Nicolae Ceausescu style, if it gets to that point. And so to a certain extent, it gets to that. But so, for example, I'm not sure the exact link, but if you look at, there's been a documentary that Rodrigo Ambrisi from a Brazilian guy runs the Dash Brazil channel. He took a trip to Venezuela and filmed a documentary where he actually paid for just about everything in Dash. He paid all his meals, he paid his gas, he paid his hotels and stuff, and just filmed every single thing there.
So he could actually see places where it was being accepted.
Like, you can see the pictures of the Calvin Klein boutique in Caracas with the Dash Accepted Here sticker. You can see the subway that's staying there. There's a lot of actual evidence put out of these things on a day-to-day basis. And they're all marked very specifically on a map. And in fact, as there's a group that's working on a crypto tourism business for Venezuela to specifically have people come in and take a tour around and just experience spending Dash everywhere. And of course, one thing I've been looking forward to being able to do myself is to actually go there myself.
Yeah, that's
which
definitely something
it's always
I
one
wanna
of those
do.
things where I'm like I got to weigh the risks, and definitely can't use my American passport to go, and just it's always. But yeah, I mean, just ample tons of evidence, and that's the thing when I talk about fly below the radar. Like a lot of people get like the news. The further from the source it gets, the more filtered out, and the more just like
Right.
people use Bitcoin here, and it's just like, and then the further you get down, it's like there's a lot of stuff that flies under the radar. Like
Right.
who knew about New Hampshire? Except that there's a ton of really loudmouth people in New Hampshire who are like, liberty, crypto.
Well, I think
liberty,
also
crypto."
the main thing about cryptocurrency in Venezuela, obviously it is in people's best incentives if they're promoting a coin to be like, hey, we're going here, we're doing this outreach, it's all good. But let's actually look at the flip side of that. You have people who are being very vocal to Venezuelans and saying there are options. So, regardless of whether people are using it at the moment, there are 100% there are outreach programs of people going there trying to get people onboarded. I think that alone is absolutely fantastic because you're dealing with people who are only starting to become aware of cryptocurrency thanks to the petro. So they know that it's out there. And so knowing that there are other options and just having people saying, even if it is just a sticker on the door that says Dash accepted here, to get people thinking and asking, what's Dash? Is that an alternative? So regardless of outcomes right now, and maybe we'll get reporters actually going there and getting to the bottom of what's going on, I think regardless, I think it's absolutely fantastic to see people just trying to spread the word there and helping these people who have no money alternatives at the moment coming from government. Everything has to come from the private sector and from outreach programs and from cryptocurrency.
Yeah, I know that there's a lot of people there who are very hungry for it. I mean, we have a couple communities down there who are very active, though they are also very aware. I mean, we had one guy get pulled over for having too much of the old Venezuelan currency and got harassed by the police, much less cryptocurrency.
Yeah.
But we do have interest on the ground. I mean, I talked to 3 guys a couple nights ago getting their businesses set up with the Smart Cash Smart Card, and they're excited about it, but they are nervous.
Absolutely.
Because, it's not just that the laws are uncertain right now, because as it was explained to me by one of our team members who grew up in Caracas, there's basically kind of 2 governments down there. There's the president, and then there's the rest of the government, and they're not in agreement on anything. So the legal authority,
and some are open to bribes, and it's very easily,
it's a mess. And you feel for the people. And the other aspect of this, I don't need to virtue signal or whatever, but isn't it supposed to be us greedy capitalist libertarians that just want to leave them to die because they're not competitive? But it's us in this market, in this world, that are really going down and trying to do what we can to give them the tools to help themselves.
Absolutely.
And that's what the free market is really about. It's not leaving people to die. It's making sure everybody is able to do what they can do to help themselves.
Well, it's about providing alternatives.
Yeah.
It's about not using coercion. So not saying you have to use the petro, or you're no longer allowed to use the old bolivar. You have to use the new one with the 5 zeros cut off. So it's about saying, actually, you don't have to use either. And hopefully what we're going to see, and it's going to be a slow process because it has to be so under the radar, hopefully we're going to start to see a really robust ecosystem there and people using alternative currencies and managing to pull through, because it's really tough for them right now. But we are out of time here, but this has been absolutely wonderful, guys. Thank you so much for being here. It's so nice to have a recap show that's in person. I wish that I lived in New Hampshire so that we could do this all the time. But no, it definitely is just such an awesome place to be, New Hampshire. If you haven't checked it out, come check it out. Freedom is everywhere, and we love the F word. So thank you for being here and chatting with me about the news this week. It's been sensational.
Thank you very much, Naomi.
Cool. I will walk up awkwardly and press the stop button now.